My boyfriend said he was too depressed to pretend to have fun on my birthday, then drove off and left me alone in his parents' house. But when I found a hidden note in his hoodie pocket a month later, I finally understood why he was so miserable. I, 24F, have been with my boyfriend Phil, 27M, for almost 2 years. We live together in a 2-bedroom apartment in Hartwell Springs. I work 2 part-time jobs, one at a grocery store and one doing data entry from home, while also taking online classes for my business degree. Phil works full-time at a shipping company. He handles the bigger bills, I handle groceries and smaller expenses, and we split the rent. That has been the arrangement since I moved in 8 months ago. Last year, for my 23rd birthday, a few of my friends planned a night out at a bar downtown. Nothing wild, maybe 12 people total, just dinner and drinks. Phil came along. For the first hour, everything was fine. Then he had a few too many drinks and started making comments at the table that were just off. He told one of my friends her outfit was trying too hard. He interrupted a conversation I was having to correct something I said in front of everyone. At some point I leaned over and told him quietly that maybe he should slow down on the drinks. He did not take that well. He stood up and told me in front of the table that I was embarrassing him by treating him like a child. He said I always had to make things about myself and that I was spoiled. I did not argue with him there. We left early. On the drive home, he was still going. I ended up apologizing to him that night because I thought, well, we were both drinking, maybe I said it wrong, maybe I should have waited until we got home to bring it up. I told myself it was the alcohol and that it would not happen again. A few weeks after that night, he stopped mentioning it entirely and things went back to normal. So I let it go. This year I was more careful. I knew he did not like loud bars or clubs. He had said before that those kinds of places were not his thing. He called himself a homebody. So when my 24th birthday came up this past month, I planned something different. There is a 3-story entertainment center about 20 minutes from us. It has go-karts on the top floor, axe throwing on the second, and mini golf and arcade games on the ground level. I thought it was a good middle ground. Not a club, not too loud, something to actually do instead of just sitting around drinking. I told him the plan a week in advance. He said it sounded fine. The morning of my birthday, he was in a genuinely good mood. He had ordered something for himself online, some kind of limited sale on a jacket he had been watching, and it arrived that morning. He was talking about it over breakfast, showing me the brand, explaining how much he saved. It was a good start to the day. We were staying at his parents' place that weekend. They have a bigger house about 40 minutes outside the city and they had offered it to us for the weekend as a birthday thing. His parents were not there, they were visiting family. So it was just us in this nice house with a big kitchen and a garden out back. Phil spent the morning watching a game and I got ready in the afternoon. When I came downstairs in the dress I had picked out, he looked at me and said I looked nice. One time. Then he went back to his phone. We drove to the entertainment center. He was quiet the whole way. When we got there, the place was busy but not packed. There was music playing but it was not overwhelming. I paid for the wristbands that covered all the activities. He walked in, looked around, and did not say anything. I suggested we start with mini golf since there was a shorter line. He came along. He did not talk much. He did not try to joke around or get competitive the way he sometimes does when he plays games. He just went through the motions. When we got to the go-kart line, which was longer, he turned to me and told me he was not really having fun. Just like that, standing in line, on my birthday. I asked him what he wanted to do instead. He said he was hungry and that other places like this were usually better. I did not know what to say to that, so I stood there for a moment. Then he said something that I keep coming back to. He said it was not his fault that I was feeling off about his mood. We left. I suggested we stop at a diner we both liked on the way back. He said if we went there he would just sit and not talk. We went back to the house. I had picked up food from the diner anyway, on my own, because I had not eaten. He did not eat anything even though he had said he was starving. Back at the house, I told him calmly that the place we went to was an arcade, not a nightclub, and I had specifically planned it around what he said he liked. He told me he was not a party person. I told him there were no parties involved. Then the conversation shifted and he started talking about how he had been unhappy for a while. With his job, with life in general. He said he could not fake being in a good mood. I told him I understood that. I have dealt with low periods myself. But I also said I needed a few minutes to just sit by myself downstairs, because it had been a long evening. He followed me downstairs. He raised his voice. He called me a 15-year-old throwing a fit. He said I was acting spoiled, the same word from last year. At some point he grabbed his keys and left. Drove off. I was alone in someone else's house on my birthday. He came back a few hours later and slept in the other room. The next morning I tried to talk to him. I was not looking for a big apology. I just asked him to acknowledge that leaving like that was not okay. He told me that if I pushed the conversation, he might decide he was done with the relationship entirely. He presented it as a possible outcome, not a threat, but it had the same effect. I stopped talking. A few days after that he brought home dinner and a couple of small gifts. I put them on the counter. I thanked him. That was about the extent of it. I planned a small birthday thing with my family the following weekend since my actual birthday had not gone the way I wanted. He came. He was pleasant with my family, made a few jokes, helped clear the table. In the car on the way home he did not bring up the week before at all. I am writing this because I do not know if I am making this into something bigger than it is or if this is actually as bad as it feels. Both birthdays. Same outcome. Same word used on me both times. Am I overreacting? Update 1 first, thank you to everyone who commented. I read most of them. A lot of people brought up things I had not thought about in those specific terms. So here is what happened after I posted. The week following my post, Phil and I were mostly going about our normal routine. He went to work, I did my jobs and my coursework, we had dinner together most nights. He did not bring up the birthday again. Neither did I. Then one evening I was looking for a charger in the side table drawer where he sometimes leaves spare cables, and I found a folded receipt. I was not snooping. The receipt was from a restaurant. A place neither of us had been to, at least not together, on a weeknight about a month before my birthday. The bill was for 2 people. I left it where it was. I did not bring it up immediately. A few days later, I mentioned casually that I had heard the restaurant on the receipt was good and asked if he had been there. He said no, he had not heard of it. I said someone told me it was on the corner near his office. He said he did not think so, maybe I was mixing it up with somewhere else. That was a lie. The restaurant was right around the corner from his office building. I had looked it up when I found the receipt. I did not push it. I kept going about my week. The following weekend, his coworker Demi came up in conversation because Phil mentioned she was moving to a different department. I had met Demi once, briefly, at a work event maybe 6 months before. I did not think much of it at the time. He talked about her the way he talked about most people at his job, occasionally, and without much detail. A few days after that, I was doing laundry. He had left a hoodie on the bathroom floor. I checked the pockets before throwing it in. I do this with both our clothes because we have both lost things in the wash before. There was a folded note in the front pocket. Not a long note. Just a few words saying dinner was fun and they should do it again. No name signed, but the handwriting was not mine. I folded it back up and put it in the pocket. I put the hoodie in the wash. The next day I called my friend Priya, who I have known since secondary school. She lives across the city now. I had not seen her in a few weeks. I told her I needed to talk through some things. We met at a cafe near her place. I showed her a photo I had taken of the receipt on my phone before I put it back. Priya asked me straight up if I thought something was going on. I said I did not know. She did not push it further. What she did say was that she had been wanting to say something to me for a while, and this felt like the right moment. She said that the previous year, around the time of my 23rd birthday, she and 2 other friends had been talking and they all agreed that Phil's behavior that night was not normal. They had not said anything to me because they did not want to make things harder for me. She said the way he spoke to me in front of the table was something she had been sitting on for a year. I drove home from that cafe and made dinner and waited for Phil to get back from work. When he came in, I told him I had found the note. I did not describe it in detail. I just said I found it. He stood in the kitchen for a moment and then said it was nothing, that to me was just someone he got lunch with occasionally and that it was not serious. I asked how many times. He said a few. I asked if he had told me about any of those times. He did not answer that. I asked him to sleep in the other room that night. He said I was overreacting. That word again. He slept in the other room. I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling and then got up and started making a list on my phone. It was a practical list. Things in the apartment that were mine. Furniture I had brought in. My name on anything connected to the lease or the utilities. I had been added to the lease 5 months in and my name was on the electricity bill. By the end of the week, I had called the leasing office to ask about my options. I had also called my cousin Yemi, who works in property management in Hartwell Springs. She said she would keep an eye out for available units that were within what I could manage on my own. I have not made any decisions yet as of writing this, but I have a clearer picture of where things stand than I did 3 weeks ago. Update 2. A lot happened in the 6 weeks since my last update, so I will try to write it in order. A week after I posted update 1, I found out more about the situation with Demi. Not from Phil, but from a woman I used to work with named Solange who happens to work in the same office building as Phil, different company, different floor. She texted me asking if Phil and I were still together. I said we were, technically. She said she had seen him and a woman from his office at a place down the street from their building twice in the past 2 months, and the second time they were sitting closer than colleagues usually do. She said she almost texted me the first time but was not sure if she was reading into it. I thanked her and said I appreciated it. I went home that evening and asked Phil directly if there was something going on with Demi beyond what he had told me. He said he had already answered that question. I said Solange had seen them together. He told me Solange was a gossip and that I was letting other people manage my emotions for me. 2 days after that, Phil came home and said he needed to tell me something. He sat down at the kitchen table. He said he and Demi had developed feelings for each other over the past few months. He said nothing physical had happened but that he had been going to lunch with her regularly and they had been texting. He said he was telling me because it was not fair to keep it from me. I asked him when it started. He said around 3 months ago. I asked him where he thought it left us. He said he did not know, that he was confused. I got up, went to the bedroom, and started pulling my documents out of the filing box we kept on the top shelf of the closet. Birth certificate, passport, the folder with my college enrollment papers. I put them in my backpack. He came to the doorway and asked what I was doing. I said I was organizing my papers. He went back to the living room. That same week I told Yemi I needed to move faster. She found a 1-bedroom in a building she manages, about 15 minutes from where I work. It was within my budget if I cut back on a few things and picked up extra hours at the grocery store. I said I wanted it. I signed the new lease at the end of that week. I did not tell Phil right away. I kept going about the apartment normally. I worked my shifts, finished a course assignment, cooked a few dinners. He was around but we were not talking much. He had started staying up later in the other room. On a Friday evening I had asked Priya and another friend to come help me move boxes. I had been slowly, quietly, moving smaller items to my car over the week before. Books, clothes, things from the bathroom, the kitchen equipment I had brought when I moved in. By the time Priya arrived, most of what I needed was already in bags. We did 2 trips in her car and 1 in mine. We were done by 9 in the evening. Phil was not home that night. I left his key on the counter. I texted him that night to say I had moved out and that my name would be removed from the lease within the month. I also told him to contact me only if it was about the lease or any shared bills, and I would do the same. He called twice. I did not answer. He texted asking if we could talk. I said there was nothing left to go over. Update 3: I have been in my new place for just over a month. The first week I slept on an air mattress because my bed frame had not arrived yet. I ate a lot of cereal and pasta. My place is smaller than the apartment I shared with Phil. There is one window in the main room that gets good light in the morning. I bought a plant for it. Yemi stopped by in the second week with a spare lamp and some dishes she was not using. Priya came over one weekend and we put together a bookshelf from a flat pack. It took 2 hours and one of the shelves is slightly uneven but it is holding. Phil texted me twice in the first month. Once to say he wanted to return something of mine that had been left behind. I told him to leave it at the building's front desk. He did. It was a book I had forgotten. The second text was longer. He wrote that he was going through a hard period and that he thought we had both handled things badly. I read it once and did not reply. Demi is still at his office, from what I understand. I have not asked and no one has volunteered that information directly. At work, I picked up 2 extra Saturday shifts this month. I am taking a short break from my online classes, just 1 term, to get the finances settled. I had already completed enough credits that I am not behind on anything. My cousin Yemi invited me to her family's thing last weekend, a casual outdoor lunch at her mother's house. I went. There were maybe 15 people there. I sat with her younger brother, who just started university, and he spent 20 minutes explaining to me why a specific video game series was better than another. I had no idea what he was talking about but I nodded along. On my way home from that lunch, I stopped at a grocery store. I bought ingredients for a soup I had been meaning to try. I made it that evening in my own kitchen, in my own pot, in my own apartment. It came out fine. Now let's move to the next story. Story 2: I caught my best man and fiancé together in hotel room the night before wedding, so I destroyed his career, got him fired, and sent him to prison for fraud. He lost everything while I found true love. My best friend Albert, 29M, slept with my fiancée Alexa, 27F, 2 days before our wedding. I, 28M, have known Albert since college. We were roommates for 3 years and he's been my closest friend for 8 years now. Alexa and I got engaged 18 months ago after dating for 4 years. We met at a marketing conference and hit it off immediately. She works as a social media manager for a tech startup downtown. I'm a software developer at a mid-sized consulting firm. Albert works at the same company as me but in the business development department. He's always been the charming guy who could talk his way into anything. The wedding was supposed to be this past Saturday. We had 150 guests coming, a venue booked at the Riverside Gardens, catering for $8,000, and everything planned down to the last detail. Alexa had been working on the wedding planning for over a year. Her sister Pearl, 25F, was the maid of honor and Albert was supposed to be my best man. 3 months ago, Albert offered to help coordinate the bachelor and bachelorette parties. He suggested we all stay at the Hampton Inn downtown since it was close to the bars we wanted to hit. He insisted on booking the rooms himself because he said he had some corporate discount that could save us money. I thought it was nice of him to handle the logistics. The bachelor party was last Thursday night. We went to 3 different bars and ended up at a club until 2 a.m. Albert was buying rounds all night and seemed to be having a great time. Alexa's bachelorette party was the same night but they went to different places. The plan was for everyone to meet up at the hotel bar around midnight for one last drink together before the wedding weekend officially started. I got back to my room around 2:30 a.m. and texted Alexa to see if she made it back safely. She replied that she was already in bed and would see me at the rehearsal dinner tomorrow. Everything seemed normal. Friday was the rehearsal at the church, followed by dinner at Morelli's Italian restaurant. Both our families were there along with a wedding party. The dinner went well and everyone seemed to be enjoying themselves. Alexa looked beautiful in her blue dress and kept squeezing my hand under the table. Albert gave a toast about friendship and loyalty that had everyone laughing. After dinner, some of the younger crowd wanted to continue the party back at the hotel bar. I was tired, but Alexa said she wanted to go for just one drink. We got to the hotel around 10 p.m. and ordered a round for everyone. The group included Albert, Alexa, her sister Pearl, my brother Tom, 26M, and about 6 other friends from the wedding party. Around 11:30 p.m., I noticed Alexa checking her phone frequently. She seemed distracted and kept looking toward the hotel elevator. When I asked if everything was okay, she said she was just tired and wanted to head up soon. Albert was also on his phone more than usual, but I didn't think much of it at the time. At midnight, Alexa said she needed some air and was going to step outside for a few minutes. She kissed me on the cheek and said she'd be right back. I was talking to my brother about the golf tournament we were planning for next month. After about 20 minutes, I realized Alexa hadn't come back. I texted her and she replied that she was feeling overwhelmed and had gone up to her room to rest. I looked around and noticed Albert was also missing. His beer was still half full on the table. I asked Pearl if she knew where Albert went and she said she thought he went to get more drinks from the bar upstairs. But when I checked, the upstairs bar had closed at 11 p.m. I went to the parking garage to see if either of their cars were there. Alexa's Honda was in her assigned spot, but Albert's black BMW was gone. This struck me as odd because he had been drinking and shouldn't be driving anywhere. I went back to the bar and tried to enjoy the rest of the evening, but something felt off. At 1 a.m., most people started heading to their rooms. I texted Alexa again to say goodnight and she replied with just a heart emoji. Usually she would write out full messages, especially the night before our wedding. I couldn't sleep and kept checking my phone. Around 2 a.m., I opened Instagram to scroll mindlessly. Alexa had posted a story 3 minutes earlier. It was a photo of what looked like a hotel room window with the city view. But there was something in the corner of the image that caught my attention. On the nightstand, I could see a room service menu with the number 412 printed at the top. Alexa was supposed to be in room 238. I had the room assignments list because Albert had shared it with the groomsmen earlier in the week. I got dressed and took the elevator to the 4th floor. Room 412 was at the end of the hallway. I stood outside the door for about 5 minutes trying to convince myself I was being paranoid. Then I heard Alexa's laugh from inside the room. It was her distinctive giggle that she does when she's really enjoying herself. I knocked on the door. There was silence for about 30 seconds, then shuffling sounds. Albert opened the door wearing just a hotel bathrobe. His hair was messy and he had lipstick on his neck. Behind him, I could see Alexa sitting on the bed with the sheet pulled up to her chest. Albert looked me straight in the eye and said he could explain. I walked past him into the room. Alexa started crying and saying my name over and over. I pulled out my phone and took 3 photos before either of them could react. I told Alexa she could keep the engagement ring because it was fake anyway. This wasn't true, but I wanted to hurt her in that moment. Her face went completely white. I told Albert that his friend Stephanie, 26F, from the accounting department had been collecting evidence of him taking credit for her work on the Morrison account and the Patterson proposal. His smug expression disappeared instantly. Then I told them both that I had just forwarded the photos to Albert's girlfriend Lisa, 28F. He had been dating her for 6 months and had introduced her to our friend group just last month. Alexa started screaming at Albert asking if he had a girlfriend this whole time. I left them arguing and went back to my room. I called my parents at 3 a.m. and told them the wedding was cancelled. My mom started crying, but my dad just asked what I needed them to do. I told them to call the vendors in the morning and cancel everything. I drove to Danny's Diner and sat there until 6 a.m. writing emails to our HR department about Albert. I had screenshots from Stephanie showing how Albert had presented her market analysis as his own work. I also had email chains where he had pressured junior staff to work unpaid overtime on his projects. By 7 a.m. Saturday morning, I had canceled the photographer, the florist, the DJ, and the catering. The venue was the hardest call because they kept asking for a reason. When I told them what happened, the manager said they had dealt with similar situations before and offered to refund 70% of our deposit instead of the 20% stated in the contract. Alexa had sent me 47 text messages and 12 emails by noon on Saturday. She went from apologizing to accusing me of overreacting to begging me to call her. In one of her emails, she blamed Albert for manipulating her and said she realized she had made a terrible mistake. She sent these emails from her work account, which I knew was monitored by her company's IT department. Lisa called me Saturday afternoon. She thanked me for sending the photos and said she had suspected Albert was cheating but hadn't had any proof. She told me Albert had been lying to her about where he was spending his evenings and had been getting phone calls he wouldn't answer in front of her. Lisa and I met for coffee on Sunday morning. She brought a folder full of evidence about Albert that she had been collecting. Apparently, he had been cheating on her with at least 2 other women besides Alexa. She had screenshots of dating app conversations and credit card receipts from restaurants where he had taken other women. Lisa works as a project manager for one of our company's biggest clients. She told me she planned to bring her concerns about Albert's professional conduct to her supervisor. Her company had been considering expanding their contract with us, but she said Albert's behavior would definitely impact that decision. On Monday morning, I went to HR with Stephanie and we presented everything we had on Albert. The HR director, Patricia, 45F, took detailed notes and said they would launch an immediate investigation. She asked if I needed time off to deal with the personal situation, but I said I preferred to stay busy with work. Albert was called into HR on Tuesday morning. According to Stephanie, he was in there for over 2 hours. When he came out, his face was red and he looked shaken. He tried to approach me at my desk, but I walked away. Alexa kept calling and texting, but I never responded. On Wednesday, she showed up at my apartment building. The doorman called up and I told him not to let her up. She stood outside for an hour holding a sign that said she was sorry. I watched from my window as building security eventually asked her to leave. Albert sent me one text message on Thursday. It just said that I had ruined his life. I replied with a screenshot of him standing in the hotel room doorway in his bathrobe, and wrote underneath it, "You ruined your own life." Update 1: A lot has happened since my last post and I wanted to update everyone who is following this situation. The past 3 weeks have been intense, but things are finally starting to settle down. Albert was fired from our company last Friday. It wasn't just because of the evidence Stephanie and I presented to HR. It turns out Lisa had been documenting his unprofessional behavior for months. She brought detailed records to her supervisor showing how Albert had been lying to clients about project timelines and overcharging for services he wasn't actually providing. Lisa's company was considering terminating their contract with us because of Albert's conduct. This contract represents about 15% of our annual revenue, so when Lisa's supervisor called our CEO directly, things moved very quickly. Albert was called into a meeting with HR, his department head, and the CEO on Thursday morning. He was terminated effective immediately and escorted out by security. The HR investigation also revealed that Albert had been falsifying expense reports for the past year. He had been claiming meals and travel expenses for client meetings that never actually happened. The total amount was over $12,000. Our company is pursuing legal action to recover the money. Alexa was also fired from her job, but for different reasons. Remember how she had been sending me emails from her work account? Well, her company's IT department flagged the personal emails as a misuse of company resources. When they reviewed her email history, they found hundreds of personal messages sent during work hours, including explicit conversations with Albert that went back 4 months. Alexa had also been using company time to plan our wedding. She had been making vendor calls, scheduling appointments, and even doing wedding research during work hours. Her supervisor found browser history showing she spent 2 to 3 hours per day on wedding planning websites instead of working on her assigned social media campaigns. But the thing that really got her fired was that she had been giving Albert inside information about her company's social media strategies. Her startup was competing for the same clients as Albert's department, and she had been sharing confidential campaign details with him. This violated her non-disclosure agreement and several company policies. The most satisfying part happened 2 weeks ago. Albert had been scheduled to present a major project proposal to potential clients. This was a big deal because landing this contract would have meant a promotion for him. I knew about the presentation because it was all he had talked about for months. What Albert didn't know was that I had discovered his entire presentation was copied from a competitor's public case study. I had found the original document while doing research for my own project. It was published by a marketing firm in Chicago 6 months ago and was available on their website. I printed out the original case study and left it on Stephanie's desk with a note suggesting she might want to share it with the appropriate people. She forwarded it to Patricia in HR, who then shared it with the department head. On the day of Albert's presentation, instead of presenting to clients, he was called into another HR meeting. They confronted him with the plagiarized material and he couldn't explain how his presentation was nearly identical to the Chicago firm's case study. This was the final straw that led to his termination. Lisa has been incredibly helpful throughout this process. She connected me with a lawyer who specializes in employment issues because Albert had been threatening to sue me for defamation. The lawyer reviewed all my evidence and said Albert had no case. Everything I had shared with HR and Lisa was factual and well documented. Lisa also helped me understand how deep Albert's deception had been. She showed me text messages where he had been planning to break up with her after our wedding. He had told her he was getting tired of their relationship and wanted to focus on his career. Meanwhile, he had been telling Alexa that he was falling for her and wanted to start a serious relationship. Alexa tried a different approach 2 weeks ago. She showed up at my office building and waited in the lobby until I came down for lunch. She followed me to the sandwich shop across the street and tried to start a conversation. I ordered my food and left without acknowledging her. She then sent a letter to my apartment through my building's mail system. It was 6 pages long and detailed how sorry she was and how Albert had manipulated her. She claimed he had told her that I was having doubts about the marriage and was planning to call off the wedding anyway. She said he convinced her that I wouldn't be hurt because I secretly didn't want to get married. I showed the letter to Lisa and she laughed. She told me Albert had used similar manipulation tactics on her. He would tell her that her friends didn't really like her or that her family thought she was making bad decisions. It was his way of isolating her and making her dependent on his version of reality. The financial cleanup from the cancelled wedding took longer than expected. The venue ended up refunding 80% of our deposit because they said the circumstances were exceptional. The photographer was understanding and only charged us for the engagement session we had already done. The florist kept our deposit, but we expected that. The hardest part was dealing with all the wedding gifts that had already arrived. We had received about 40 gifts from early guests. I spent a weekend writing thank you notes and return shipping labels to send everything back. Some relatives insisted I keep their gifts anyway, but I returned everything except a set of kitchen knives from my uncle because he said he had already thrown away the receipt. My brother Tom helped me move all of Alexa's belongings out of my apartment. She had been gradually moving her things in over the past year and I hadn't realized how much stuff she had accumulated. We packed everything into boxes and I arranged for her to pick them up from the building storage room when I wasn't home. Going through her belongings was when I found more evidence of the affair. Hidden in a jewelry box was a hotel key card from the night I caught them. It was for room 412. I also found a receipt from a restaurant where she and Albert had dinner 3 weeks before our wedding. The receipt was dated on a night when she had told me she was having dinner with her sister. Work has actually been going well. With Albert gone, our department is functioning much better. Stephanie was promoted to senior analyst and is now leading the projects Albert used to handle. She's been giving me credit for helping expose his misconduct and several colleagues have thanked me for bringing the situation to light. The biggest surprise came last week when I ran into Pearl, Alexa's sister, at the grocery store. She approached me and apologized for not warning me about what was happening. She said she had suspected something was going on between Alexa and Albert for about a month before the wedding but wasn't sure how to handle it. Pearl told me she had seen them having lunch together twice when Alexa had claimed to be at work meetings. She also said Alexa had been acting secretive about her phone and had started working out more and buying new clothes. Pearl thought maybe Alexa was planning a surprise for me, so she didn't say anything. Pearl also revealed that Alexa had lied to the family about why the wedding was cancelled. She told everyone that I had called it off because I wasn't ready for marriage. Pearl only learned the truth when she saw my Facebook post about the situation. She was angry that Alexa had made me look like the bad guy to their entire family. I asked Pearl not to get involved in the drama, but she said she had already told her parents the real story. Apparently, Alexa's parents are not happy with her and have been pressuring her to apologize to me properly. They also made her pay back the money they had contributed to the wedding since it was cancelled due to her actions. Update 2: The situation has taken some unexpected turns and I wanted to update everyone on the latest developments. Some of you had asked about Albert and Alexa's current situations, and I now have more information about what's been happening with both of them. Albert has been struggling to find new employment. Word travels fast in our industry and several companies in town have connections to our firm. Lisa's company sent out a professional notice about terminating their contract with us specifically due to Albert's conduct. This notice was shared with other companies in their network as a warning about his professional behavior. I found out about Albert's job search because he listed me as a reference on applications without asking permission. 3 different companies called me over the past month asking about his work performance. I was honest about why he was terminated and shared the details about the plagiarism and expense fraud. Each company thanked me for the information and said they would not be moving forward with his application. Albert apparently tried to start his own consulting business, but that fell apart quickly. He was using his personal LinkedIn to promote services he wasn't qualified to provide. Several of our former clients contacted our company to ask if Albert was still affiliated with us after he reached out to them directly trying to steal their business. Our legal department sent Albert a cease and desist letter demanding he stop using our company's project examples in his marketing materials. He had been showing potential clients work that Stephanie and I had actually completed and claiming it as his own achievements. The most interesting development happened 3 weeks ago when I got a call from Detective Rodriguez, 40SF, with the Financial Crimes Unit. Apparently, Albert's expense fraud was more extensive than our company initially realized. The police investigation found that he had also been running a credit card scam using client information he had access to through his work. Albert had been creating fake vendor accounts and submitting fraudulent invoices to our accounting department. He would then have the payments sent to accounts he controlled. The total amount stolen was over $45,000, which makes it a felony charge. He was arrested last Tuesday and is currently out on bail. I was asked to testify about the timeline of events and the evidence I had provided to HR. The detective said my documentation had been crucial in building their case. Stephanie also testified about the pattern of Albert taking credit for other people's work, which helped establish his character for dishonesty. Alexa's situation has been different but equally dramatic. After losing her job, she moved back in with her parents in the suburbs. She had been living paycheck to paycheck despite making decent money, so she couldn't afford her apartment without employment. Pearl reached out to me again 2 weeks ago with some surprising information. She said Alexa had been lying to everyone about the extent of her relationship with Albert. According to Pearl, Alexa had been planning to leave me for Albert even before the wedding. The hotel incident wasn't a mistake or moment of weakness, it was part of a longer-term plan. Pearl found text messages on Alexa's old phone that she left at their parents' house. The messages showed that Alexa and Albert had been discussing getting together after my wedding for over 2 months. They had planned for Alexa to go through with the wedding to avoid embarrassing both families, then divorce me within a year so they could be together openly. The messages also revealed that they had been intimate multiple times before the hotel incident. They had been meeting at Albert's apartment when Lisa was out of town for work. Alexa had been lying to me about working late or having dinner with friends on those nights. What made this discovery even worse was that they had been making fun of me in their messages. Albert called me naive and boring. Alexa wrote that she felt sorry for me because I was so trusting. They joked about how easy it was to fool me and made bets about whether I would figure out what was happening before the wedding. Pearl was disgusted by what she found and decided to share the messages with their parents. Alexa's mother called me to apologize and said she was ashamed of her daughter's behavior. She asked if there was anything she could do to make up for the pain Alexa had caused. I told Alexa's mother that I appreciated the apology but just wanted to move on with my life. She understood and said the family would respect my wish to have no contact with Alexa. She also mentioned that Alexa was having trouble finding new employment because her previous company had given her a negative reference. The legal consequences for Alexa came from an unexpected direction. Remember how she had been sharing confidential information with Albert about her company's social media strategies? Well, her former employer filed a lawsuit against her for violating her non-disclosure agreement and causing them to lose 2 major clients. One of those clients had been considering a large social media campaign but chose a different agency after learning that their confidential information had been shared. The startup is seeking damages for lost revenue and legal fees. Alexa can't afford a lawyer and is trying to represent herself in court. I also learned that Alexa had been stealing from me during our relationship. When I was going through bank statements for the lawyer, I noticed several unauthorized charges on my credit card. Alexa had memorized my card number and had been making small purchases that I hadn't noticed. The total amount was about $800 over 6 months. These weren't emergency purchases or things for our shared expenses. She had been buying clothes, cosmetics, and paying for lunches with friends. When I confronted her about this through Pearl, Alexa claimed she thought I wouldn't mind because we were engaged and planning to share finances anyway. I filed a police report about the credit card fraud. The officer said it was considered theft regardless of our relationship status because she didn't have permission to use my card. Alexa will likely face charges for this as well, though the amount might only result in a misdemeanor. The most unexpected twist came when Lisa started dating someone new. His name is Robert, 32M, and he works as a security consultant. Lisa and I had remained friends throughout this ordeal and she introduced me to Robert 2 weeks ago when we all met for coffee. Robert had an interesting perspective on the whole situation because he specializes in investigating corporate fraud and employee misconduct. He reviewed all the evidence I had collected and was impressed by how thorough my documentation had been. He said most people don't think to gather evidence the way I did, which made the HR investigation and police case much stronger. Robert also pointed out that Albert's behavior showed classic signs of narcissistic personality traits. He explained that people like Albert often target individuals who are trusting and successful because they enjoy the manipulation and want to tear down what other people have built. Through Robert's connections, I learned that Albert had actually been fired from a previous job for similar issues. He had been caught falsifying reports and taking credit for colleagues' work at a company he worked for right after college. This information never came up during his background check when our company hired him because his former employer had agreed not to share details in exchange for Albert leaving quietly. Work has continued to improve significantly. Our department received recognition from upper management for the quality of work we've been producing since Albert left. Stephanie and I were both given bonuses for our contributions to the Morrison account that Albert had tried to take credit for. I've also been dating someone new, though I'm taking things slowly this time. Her name is Rachel, 26F, and she works as a nurse at the Children's Hospital downtown. We met through a hiking group I joined a few months ago. She knows the basic outline of what happened with Alexa and Albert but isn't interested in hearing all the details, which I appreciate. Rachel has a completely different personality from Alexa. She's direct and honest about everything, even small things like if she's running late or if she doesn't like a restaurant I suggest. After experiencing Alexa's constant lying and manipulation, I find Rachel's straightforward communication style refreshing. Update 3: I'm writing this final update because several people have been asking about the long-term outcomes for everyone involved. It's been almost 8 months since the original incident and I finally feel like this chapter of my life is completely closed. Albert pleaded guilty to the felony fraud charges and was sentenced to 18 months in prison plus 5 years probation. He also has to pay restitution of $47,000 to our company. His lawyer tried to argue for just probation, but the judge said the premeditated nature of the crimes and the violation of trust made prison time necessary. The sentencing hearing was interesting because several character witnesses spoke about Albert's pattern of dishonest behavior. Lisa testified about the personal manipulation, and Stephanie spoke about the professional misconduct. Even some of his college friends submitted statements describing times when Albert had cheated or stolen from them. Albert's parents attended the hearing and approached me afterward to apologize. They said they had suspected Albert had problems with honesty but never realized how serious it had become. His father offered to help with the restitution payments, but our company's lawyer said that was between Albert and the court. I saw Albert one more time before he reported to prison. Rachel and I were having dinner at a restaurant downtown when he walked in with someone I didn't recognize. He was wearing a cheap suit that didn't fit well and looked like he had lost weight. When he saw me, he stared for a moment but didn't approach our table. Rachel asked if I wanted to leave, but I said we should just enjoy our meal. About 10 minutes later, Albert's dinner companion got up and left the restaurant abruptly. Albert sat alone for another few minutes, then paid his check and left without finishing his food. I later learned from Lisa that his date had recognized him from the news coverage of his arrest and decided she didn't want to be associated with him. Alexa's situation resolved differently but not necessarily better. She lost the lawsuit filed by her former employer and owes them $23,000 in damages. She couldn't afford to pay the judgment, so they garnished her wages from the part-time retail job she eventually found. The credit card fraud charges against Alexa were dropped after she agreed to pay full restitution plus court costs. She paid me back the $800 through a payment plan over 6 months. Her mother actually made most of the payments because Alexa's income was so low. Pearl told me that Alexa had to move back into her childhood bedroom and is working at a clothing store in the mall. She applied for dozens of jobs in marketing and social media but can't get hired because of the negative reference from her previous employer and the background check issues from the lawsuit. The most dramatic development with Alexa happened about 2 months ago. She started dating Albert's younger brother Kyle, 25M, apparently thinking this would somehow help her stay connected to Albert while he was in prison. Kyle works as a mechanic and had never been close to Albert, so this plan backfired spectacularly. When Kyle learned the full story of what Albert and Alexa had done, he broke up with her immediately. He also told his family about Alexa's role in Albert's downfall, which eliminated any possibility of her getting sympathy or support from that direction. Kyle later called me to apologize for his brother's actions and to let me know he had no intention of maintaining any relationship with Alexa. Alexa made one final attempt to contact me about 3 months ago. She sent a letter through a mutual friend asking if I would write a character reference for her to help with job applications. The friend who delivered the letter said Alexa was convinced that a positive reference from me would prove to employers that she wasn't a bad person. I declined to write the letter and asked the mutual friend not to serve as a messenger for Alexa again. I explained that writing a reference would require me to lie about Alexa's character, which I wasn't willing to do. The friend understood and said she hadn't realized the extent of what Alexa had done. My life has moved forward in every positive way possible. Rachel and I have been together for 6 months now and the relationship continues to be healthy and drama-free. She has 2 young kids from a previous relationship, and I've enjoyed getting to know them. We've talked about moving in together next year after her lease expires. Work has been excellent. I was promoted to senior developer and now lead a team of 4 people including Stephanie. We've landed several major contracts and our department has become one of the most profitable in the company. The CEO mentioned our turnaround as an example of how removing toxic employees can transform an entire workplace culture. I also bought a house in a different neighborhood across town. It's a 3-bedroom ranch with a big backyard that's perfect for when Rachel's kids visit. Moving out of the apartment where Alexa and I had lived together was important for my mental closure on that relationship. The most satisfying moment came last month when I received a LinkedIn notification that Albert had updated his profile from prison. He listed his current status as serving time for financial crimes and said he was looking forward to rebuilding his career upon release. Several of our former colleagues left comments questioning why he would post this information publicly. Lisa is engaged to Robert and they're planning a small wedding next spring. She asked if Rachel and I would like to attend, which shows how all of our lives have moved past the drama Albert and Alexa created. Lisa said she considers the whole experience a blessing in disguise because it led her to someone much better suited for her. I've learned to trust my instincts better and not ignore red flags in relationships or friendships. Rachel and I have talked about communication and honesty being the foundation of any successful partnership. She's met my family and friends, and everyone comments on how much happier and more relaxed I seem now. The financial recovery took longer than expected but worked out well in the end. Between the vendor refunds, the restitution payments, and money I saved by not going through with an expensive wedding, I actually came out ahead financially. I used the extra money as a down payment on the house. Looking back, I'm grateful this all happened before the wedding rather than after. Discovering Alexa and Albert's betrayal when I did saved me from years of lies and manipulation. Some people have told me I should feel angry or bitter about what they did, but mostly I just feel relieved that they're both out of my life permanently. The whole experience taught me that some people are fundamentally dishonest and will hurt anyone to get what they want. Albert and Alexa deserved each other, and they got exactly what their actions earned them. Meanwhile, I'm building a life with someone who shares my values and treats me with respect. I don't plan to post any more updates about this situation because there's nothing left to resolve. Albert will be in prison for the next year and Alexa will be dealing with the consequences of her choices for much longer. Rachel and I are focused on our future together, and that's the only story that matters to me now. My boyfriend's mom faked cancer symptoms and moved into our tiny studio for months, making demands and ruining my grades while my BF quit his job to take care of her even though she was recovering fine, but he got mad when I got a job across the country and moved out. I, 24F, have been with my boyfriend 26M, for almost 3 years. We live in a studio apartment near campus because I'm finishing my engineering degree and working 2 part-time jobs to cover tuition. Works as a software developer for a startup downtown. Before last month, our life was manageable. We had our routines down. I'd wake up at 6 for my morning shift at the campus library, come home, study, go to my evening job at a tutoring center, then come back and do homework until midnight. Worked 9 to 5 and handled most of the cooking since my schedule was packed. We split rent and bills evenly. It wasn't glamorous, but it worked. Dash's mother, Teresa, 52F, has always been difficult. The first time I met her 2 years ago, she spent the entire dinner talking about Dash's ex-girlfriend from high school and how she was studying to be a doctor. She asked me 3 times what my parents did for work. When I said my dad was a mechanic and my mom worked at a grocery store, she got quiet and changed the subject. After that dinner, Dash told me not to take it personally. His mom had specific ideas about who he should date and I didn't fit the picture. Fine. I could handle that. We kept our distance. She lived about 90 minutes away in a suburb and we saw her maybe twice a year for major holidays. 3 weeks ago, Teresa called Dash at 11 at night. She said she needed to stay with us for one night because she had an early medical appointment at a hospital near our place. Dash said yes without asking me. She showed up the next evening with 4 suitcases. When I asked why she needed so much luggage for one night, she said she wasn't sure how long the appointment process would take. Red flag number 1. That first night, she took over our only living space. Our studio is maybe 400 square feet total. We have a bed in one corner, a small couch, a kitchen counter, and a bathroom. That's it. Teresa set up camp on our couch and immediately started rearranging things. She moved my textbooks off the coffee table and replaced them with her medications. She opened all the windows even though it was 40 degrees outside and told us she needed fresh air because of her condition. When I asked what condition, she said the doctors were still figuring it out, but it was serious. Possibly cancer. She had an MRI scheduled for the next week. The smell started on day 2. Teresa has some kind of skin condition or maybe she just doesn't shower regularly. Our studio started smelling like old milk mixed with baby powder. I bought air fresheners but she complained they gave her headaches. She kept the windows open constantly. Dash and I were freezing at night. I wore 2 sweaters to bed. On day 3, Dash tried to talk to her about the plan. He asked when she'd be going home. She said she couldn't go home because her ex-husband Wallace, 55M, was harassing her about their divorce settlement. She said Wallace was an alcoholic who couldn't be trusted and she needed to stay somewhere safe until her lawyers sorted things out. Dash asked how long that would take. She started crying and said she thought her own son would support her during the hardest time of her life. Dash backed off immediately. The boundary violations got worse. Teresa would wake up at 5 in the morning and turn on all the lights. She'd make herself breakfast using our groceries without asking. She'd leave the dishes in the sink. When I politely asked her to clean up after herself, she said she was too weak from her condition. I started washing her dishes before going to class because I couldn't stand looking at them. The breaking point of that first week happened at 2 in the morning on a Thursday. I had a major exam the next day. Dash and I were asleep when Teresa walked into our sleeping area. We don't have a separate bedroom. Our bed is just in the corner of the studio with a curtain we sometimes pull for privacy. She turned on the overhead light and stood there. I woke up and pulled the blanket up because I sleep in just a t-shirt. She asked Dash if he could give her a neck massage because her pain was unbearable. Dash was half asleep and confused. He said maybe in the morning. She stood there for another minute staring at us before she finally left. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I had to take my exam on 3 hours of sleep. I got a B-. That was my first B in 2 years of college. The religious conflict started the following weekend. Dash and I went on a trip to Thailand last year and brought back a small Buddha statue that we kept on our bookshelf. Teresa saw it and had a meltdown. She said having false idols in the house was preventing her healing. She grabbed the statue and threw it in the trash. Then she pulled out a wooden cross from one of her suitcases and demanded Dash hang it on the wall. Dash actually did it. He mounted this heavy cross above our bed. Teresa looked at it and said it was too low. She wanted it higher. Dash moved it. She said it was too far to the left. Dash moved it again. This went on for 20 minutes. After he finally got the cross in the right spot, Teresa sat down and announced she wanted us to move in with her. She said the apartment was too small and her house had 3 bedrooms. We could each have our own space. Dash asked about our jobs and my school. Her house is 90 minutes away in the opposite direction from campus. I'd have to leave at 5 in the morning to make my 8 a.m. classes. Dash's startup required him to be in the office 4 days a week for team meetings. Teresa said we were making excuses because we didn't care about her health. The medical appointments became a pattern. She'd tell us she had an appointment, we'd rearrange our schedules, and then nothing would happen. The MRI got postponed. Then she said she had a bacterial infection, possibly E. coli, and needed different tests. Then she said the doctors wanted to start chemotherapy but the insurance needed to approve it first. Every time Dash asked to see paperwork or go with her to an appointment, she'd get upset and say he didn't trust her. 2 weeks in, I asked Dash to talk to her doctor directly. He called the hospital and they said they had no record of Teresa as a patient. Dash confronted her about it. She said she'd been going to a different hospital and gave him a new name. He didn't follow up. I think he was scared of what he'd find out. During week 3, Dash's work situation fell apart. His boss had been understanding at first when Dash needed to leave early for Teresa's emergencies. But it kept happening. Dash switched to working from home full-time so he could handle whatever Teresa needed. His boss sent him an email saying the remote arrangement was temporary and he needed to return to the office by the end of the month or they'd have to discuss his role at the company. Dash started losing weight. He was skipping lunch to save money because Teresa was eating everything in our fridge. I was eating one meal a day because my work schedule didn't give me breaks and we couldn't afford extra groceries. I asked Teresa to chip in for food. She said she was on a fixed income because of her medical bills. The worst day was a Saturday 2.5 weeks into her stay. Teresa woke us up at 6 in the morning and said she needed to go to the emergency room immediately. Dash got dressed and grabbed his keys. I asked if I should come. Teresa said yes, she needed support. We got in Dash's car and started driving. 30 minutes into the drive, Teresa told Dash to take a detour. She said we needed to stop at Wallace's house first because she'd left some jewelry there and she was worried he'd sell it. We pulled up to Wallace's house at 7:30 in the morning. Teresa had a key. We went inside and she went straight to the bedroom. She started going through drawers and pulling out jewelry boxes. Wallace wasn't home. Dash asked where he was. Teresa said he was probably passed out drunk somewhere. She filled 2 shopping bags with jewelry and we left. Back in the car, I asked if we were still going to the hospital. Teresa said yes. We drove for another hour. When we got to the hospital parking lot, Teresa said she needed to eat something first or she'd faint. We went to a diner across the street. She ordered a full breakfast. We sat there while she ate slowly and talked about her divorce lawyer. We finally walked into the emergency room at 11. The nurse asked what the emergency was. Teresa described her symptoms. The nurse took her information and told her to wait. We sat in the waiting room for 3 hours. At 2 in the afternoon, a different nurse called Teresa's name. They talked for 5 minutes. The nurse came back and said Teresa's symptoms weren't severe enough for emergency care and she should make an appointment with her primary physician. Teresa argued for 10 minutes but they wouldn't admit her. We drove home. We'd been gone for 8 hours. When we got back to the apartment, Teresa went straight to the couch and turned on the TV. She didn't say, "Thank you." She didn't acknowledge that we'd wasted our entire Saturday. That night after Teresa fell asleep, Dash came and sat on the bed next to me. He put his head in his hands. He said he couldn't do this anymore. He said he was waiting for her to pass away so we could take the money from her life insurance and move to Portugal. He'd been researching cities. He had spreadsheets about cost of living. He'd already talked to a lawyer about being the executor of her will. He'd been planning her funeral. He said he knew it was wrong but he didn't see another way out. I didn't know what to say. I just sat there looking at him. The next week, I had final exams coming up. Teresa announced she had another appointment and needed Dash to take her. I said I couldn't come because I had to study. She said the appointment was specifically for family therapy and the therapist wanted to meet me. I said no. She got upset and said I was being selfish during her medical crisis. Dash asked me to reconsider. I said no again. Teresa said fine. Then Dash had to come alone because she refused to bring Wallace and Wallace was apparently jealous of how close she and Dash were. I stayed home and studied. They were gone for 6 hours. When they came back, Teresa wasn't speaking to me. Dash said the therapist never asked about me and the whole thing was just Teresa complaining about Wallace for an hour. I started planning a trip to visit my cousin in Germany. I'd been saving money from my tutoring job for over a year. I had enough for a 3-week trip. I told Dash about it. He got quiet. He said it seemed selfish to leave while his mother was sick. I said she'd been sick for a month and nothing had actually happened. He said that was a cruel thing to say. Am I wrong for wanting to leave? I can't breathe in our apartment anymore. I sleep 4 hours a night. My grades are dropping. Dash looks like he's aged 5 years in 3 weeks. But Teresa is supposedly dying and I'm planning a vacation. I don't know if that makes me a terrible person or just someone who's reached their limit. Update 1: I didn't go to Germany. After I posted, Dash and I had a long conversation about boundaries. He agreed that his mother couldn't stay forever and that we needed a timeline. He was going to talk to her the next morning. That conversation never happened. The night before Dash was supposed to set boundaries, Teresa had a seizure. Or she said she had a seizure. Dash and I were both asleep and we woke up to her screaming. She was on the floor next to the couch, shaking. Dash called an ambulance. They took her to the hospital and admitted her for observation. They kept her for 3 days. During those 3 days, Dash and I cleaned the apartment. We threw away all her food from the fridge. We washed all the dishes. We opened the windows and let the place air out. We slept for 10 hours straight the first night she was gone. On the third day, Dash got a call from the hospital saying Teresa was ready to be discharged and needed a ride home. Dash asked if they'd found anything. The doctor said they'd run a full neurological panel and found no evidence of seizure activity. They suspected it might have been a panic attack or a reaction to mixing her medications incorrectly. The doctor asked Dash what medications his mother was taking. Dash said he didn't know. The doctor said Teresa had listed over 15 different medications on her intake form but refused to provide the names or prescriptions. They were concerned about possible medication hoarding or doctor shopping. Dash picked her up. I stayed home because I had class. When they got back to the apartment, Teresa had a new story. She said the hospital had confirmed she had stage 3 cancer. She said they wanted to start chemotherapy immediately, but she needed to get her affairs in order first. She said she needed Dash to help her contact her lawyer about changing her will. I asked to see the discharge papers. She said she'd left them at the hospital by mistake. Dash asked what type of cancer. She said it was in her lymph nodes, but the doctors were still doing biopsies to determine the exact location. I looked up lymph node cancer that night. The survival rate is actually pretty good if caught early. Stage 3 is serious but not automatically a death sentence. The next week, Teresa's sister Ruth, 49F, came to visit. Ruth lived 6 states away and flew in specifically to help with Teresa's care. I'd never met Ruth before, but Dash said she was the reasonable one in the family. Ruth showed up with her daughter Madison, 22F, and they'd booked a hotel room nearby. Ruth lasted 2 days before she stopped coming to visit. On the second day, Teresa asked Ruth to reorganize her entire medication collection. Ruth spent 4 hours sorting pills into daily containers. When she finished, Teresa looked at her work and said she'd done it wrong. Ruth needed to start over and organize them by symptom instead of by time of day. Ruth said no. Teresa started crying and said her own sister was abandoning her when she needed help the most. Ruth packed up her pill organizers and left. She took Madison with her. I heard later from Dash that Ruth had texted him saying she couldn't handle their mother's demands and that Dash needed to set serious boundaries before Teresa destroyed his life. Ruth flew home 3 days early. After Ruth left, Teresa's medical situation suddenly became real. She had an actual appointment at an actual oncology center. Dash went with her. I stayed home. When they came back, Dash looked shaken. He said the doctor had confirmed that Teresa had cancer. He said she'd already had surgery months ago to remove a tumor and now she was starting chemotherapy. The doctor had shown him the scans and the pathology reports. It was real. I asked why she hadn't told us about the surgery before. Dash said she'd had it done right after she separated from Wallace and she hadn't told anyone because she was embarrassed about being sick and alone. I asked why she'd lied about so many appointments. Dash said she hadn't lied, she'd just been confused about dates because of her medications. Teresa started chemo the following week. I agreed to be more supportive. I texted her a few times asking how she was doing. She responded with long paragraphs about her pain levels and her nausea. I offered to pick up groceries for her. She sent me a list of 30 items including specific brands that were only available at stores across town. I picked up what I could find at our local grocery store. When I brought the bags home, Teresa went through everything and said I'd gotten the wrong brands for half the items. She asked if I could go back and exchange them. I said no. She didn't ask again. Teresa's hair started falling out. She got thinner. She slept more. The apartment stopped smelling as bad because she was showering less frequently and staying on the couch most of the time. Dash was gentle with her. He made her soup. He helped her to the bathroom when she was too weak to walk on her own. I watched all of this happen and I still couldn't bring myself to feel sympathetic. She was sick. That was real. But everything else about her behavior hadn't changed. She still left messes for us to clean. She still made demands. She still cried when she didn't get her way. Being sick didn't make her a better person. It just made her a sick person who was difficult to live with. Dash asked me one night if I felt bad for doubting her. I said I doubted her behavior, not her diagnosis. He didn't understand the distinction. He said I needed to be kinder because she was going through something terrible. I said I was being as kind as I could manage given that we lost our privacy, our savings, and our peace of mind. He didn't bring it up again. I still didn't go to Germany. I used the money I'd saved to cover groceries for 3 weeks when our budget ran out. Teresa never offered to pay us back for food or utilities. Dash never asked her to. Update 2: Dash quit his job last month. His boss had given him an ultimatum about returning to the office and Dash chose his mother over his career. He said he couldn't focus on work while dealing with everything at home and his performance had been slipping. His boss accepted his resignation effective immediately. Dash is now paying rent out of his savings account. We had a conversation about money and he showed me his bank statements. He has enough to cover his half of rent for maybe 4 more months if he's careful. After that, he'll be completely broke. I asked what happens then. He said he'd figure something out. I couldn't tell him that I have my own savings account with $3,000 that I've been hiding for the past year. I opened it after the first time Teresa visited and made a comment about how Dash could do better. I started putting aside $20 from each paycheck. It was supposed to be emergency money in case I needed to buy a plane ticket home to my parents. Now it feels like insurance against whatever is coming next. Teresa's been living with us for 4 months now. Her chemo treatments happen twice a week. Dash drives her to every appointment. She's responded well to treatment according to her doctors. Her hair is growing back in thin patches. She's gained a little weight. The cancer is shrinking. Dash seems lighter lately. He stopped looking exhausted all the time. He's been cooking elaborate meals and actually smiling when we eat together. I realized he's happier unemployed and taking care of his mother than he was working 60-hour weeks at the startup. He told me last week that quitting was the best decision he'd made in years. He said he'd been burnt out for months and his mother's situation gave him an excuse to step away. I don't think he plans to go back to work. We haven't talked about it directly, but he's made comments about finding remote freelance work eventually or maybe taking a year off to figure out what he really wants to do. Every time I bring up his job search, he changes the subject. Teresa's divorce from Wallace was finalized last month. She got the house and half of Wallace's retirement account. She's been talking about moving back home once her treatment is finished. Dash has been non-committal when she brings it up. He says things like "we'll see how you're feeling" or "let's take it one day at a time." I think he wants her to stay. I think he's gotten used to having a purpose and taking care of her. His entire life has restructured around her appointments and her meals and her medication schedule. When I suggested last week that maybe we should start planning for when she leaves, he got defensive. He said I was rushing her recovery and being insensitive about her needs. I've been applying to jobs for after graduation. I finished my degree in 2 months. I've had 3 interviews for engineering positions in different cities. One is in Denver. One is in Seattle. One is in Austin. I haven't told Dash about any of them. When he asks about my job search, I tell him I'm still looking locally. The truth is I don't know if we're going to make it to my graduation. Our relationship has become transactional. We split bills. We sleep in the same bed. We're polite to each other. But we don't talk about anything real anymore. Every conversation circles back to his mother or money or practical logistics. We haven't been on a date in 4 months. We haven't had sex in longer than that. Last week I asked Dash what happens when his savings run out. He said he'd been thinking about asking his father for a loan. His father left when Dash was 12 and they haven't spoken in over a decade. I asked if he was serious. He said he didn't know what else to do. I told him he could get a job. Any job. Even part-time would help. He said he couldn't work and take care of his mother at the same time. I said his mother was recovering and would eventually go home. He said I didn't understand how sick she still was. She's not that sick anymore. She walks around the apartment without help. She makes herself meals. She watches TV for hours. She's bored, not incapacitated. But Dash treats her like she's fragile. He jumps up whenever she needs anything. He asks her multiple times a day if she's comfortable or if she needs medication or if she wants him to adjust the temperature. I've stopped offering to help. I go to class, I go to work, I come home and do homework. I exist around them. Teresa has stopped trying to engage with me. She talks to Dash and acts like I'm not in the room. Sometimes I prefer it that way. My parents called last week and asked when they could visit for my graduation. I said I wasn't sure if we had room. My mom asked if Dash's mother was still staying with us. I said yes. My mom went quiet for a minute and then said she was worried about me. I told her I was fine. She said I didn't sound fine. I promised her I'd figure things out after graduation. She said I could always come home if I needed to. I said I knew that. After we hung up, I sat in my car outside the apartment building for an hour before going inside. Dash has been talking about Portugal again. He showed me listings for apartments in Lisbon last night. He said we could move there once his mother's treatment is fully finished and she's stable. He said the cost of living is lower and we could both find remote work and start fresh. He talked about it for 20 minutes while I nodded and pretended to look at the listings. He didn't notice that I didn't say anything. He didn't ask if I wanted to move to Portugal. He just assumed I'd go along with the plan. I don't think I'm going to Portugal. Update 3: I graduated 3 weeks ago. My parents drove 8 hours to attend the ceremony. Dash came but Teresa stayed home. She said she wasn't feeling well enough to sit through a long event. My parents took us all out to dinner afterward and Teresa didn't come to that either. During dinner, my dad asked Dash about his job plans. Dash said he was taking time to explore his options. My dad asked how he was paying bills. Dash said he had savings. My dad looked at me. I didn't say anything. After my parents left, Dash asked why I'd been so quiet at dinner. I said I was tired. He said I seemed distant lately. I said I had a lot on my mind with job applications. He asked if I'd heard back from any companies. I said not yet. That was a lie. I'd accepted the position in Seattle 2 days before graduation. They wanted me to start in 3 weeks. I hadn't told Dash because I didn't know how to tell him I was leaving. I told him last week. We were sitting on the bed and Teresa was asleep on the couch. I said I needed to talk to him about something important. He looked nervous. I said I got a job offer in Seattle and I accepted it. I said I was moving in 2 weeks. Dash stared at me for a long time. Then he asked if I expected him to come with me. I said I didn't expect anything. I said he needed to figure out what he wanted to do with his life and I needed to start mine. He asked if this was because of his mother. I said it was because of a lot of things. He started crying. He said he'd given up everything to take care of his mother and now I was abandoning him. I said he'd made his choices and I was making mine. He said I was being selfish. I said maybe I was. Teresa woke up during this conversation. She asked what was happening. Dash told her I was moving to Seattle. She said she wasn't surprised. She said she'd always known I wasn't committed to Dash. She said I was too focused on my career to care about family. I didn't respond to her. I looked at Dash and asked if he had anything else to say. He said he thought we were going to build a life together. I said I thought so too, but that was before his mother moved in and he stopped being the person I fell in love with. He asked what that meant. I said he used to have ambition and independence and now his entire identity was wrapped up in taking care of someone who was perfectly capable of taking care of herself. I said his mother wasn't dying anymore and he was using her recovery as an excuse to avoid dealing with his own life. Teresa started yelling at me. She said I had no idea what she'd been through. She said I was cruel and heartless. Dash told her to stop. She kept going. She said Dash deserved someone better than me. She said she'd always known I would leave eventually because I wasn't good enough for her son. I packed a bag that night and went to stay with a friend from school. I came back 3 days later when Dash was out with his mother at an appointment. I packed the rest of my things. I left my key on the counter. I texted Dash that I'd pay my half of rent through the end of the month, but after that he was on his own. He texted back asking if we could talk. I said there wasn't anything left to talk about. He called me 6 times. I didn't answer. I moved to Seattle last week. My new apartment is a studio about the same size as the place I shared with Dash, but it's just mine. I can keep the windows closed. I can organize my space however I want. I can come home after work and sit in silence without anyone demanding anything from me. Dash texted yesterday asking if I was settled in. I said yes. He said his mother moved back to her house last week now that she's finished with treatment. He said the apartment feels empty without both of us. He said he misses me. He said he's sorry for how things ended and he wishes we could have worked it out. I didn't respond. I don't think there's anything to say. I heard from a mutual friend that Dash moved back in with Teresa. The friend said Dash is helping her around the house while she recovers fully. The friend asked if Dash and I were getting back together. I said no. My job is going well. I work with a good team on projects that actually interest me. I'm making more money than I ever did with both my part-time jobs combined. I signed a 1-year lease on my apartment. I'm planning to visit my parents next month. Sometimes I think about texting Dash to check how he's doing. Then I remember sitting in that studio apartment wearing 2 sweaters because his mother needed the windows open. I remember skipping meals to save money while she ate our groceries. I remember him crying about wanting her to die so we could escape to Europe and then quitting his job to take care of her full-time 6 weeks later. I don't regret leaving. I regret staying as long as I did. Now let's move to the next story. Story 2. My golden child brother borrowed $22,000 from me over 3 years and never paid back a single dollar, then called me his personal ATM at a family party, so I cut off all financial support, but my parents chose him over me and threatened to go no contact unless I resume funding his life. My 28M, older brother Henry, 32M, has always been the golden child in our family. He's charming, outgoing, and everyone loves him at family gatherings. I've always been the quiet one who keeps to himself and focuses on work. Henry has never been good with money. Even in college, he would blow through his allowance in the first week and then ask our parents or me for cash. After graduation, he got a decent job at a marketing firm but somehow never had any savings. He would always say he was living life to the fullest while I was wasting my youth by being responsible. Our parents, Linda, 58F, and Robert, 60M, have always enabled him. They would give him money whenever he asked and make excuses for his spending habits. Meanwhile, they praised me for being financially responsible but never offered me any help, not that I needed it. I work as an accountant and live within my means. I have a small apartment, drive a used car, and save about 30% of my income. The first time Henry asked me for money was 3 years ago. He needed $500 to cover his rent because he had spent his paycheck on a weekend trip to Vegas. I gave it to him because he promised to pay me back within a month. That month turned into 6 months, and when I asked about it, he said he would get me the money when his next bonus came in. The bonus went toward a new motorcycle. After that, the requests became more frequent. He would need money for car repairs, credit card bills, or just general expenses. The amounts kept getting bigger too. First it was a few $100s, then it became $1,000, then $2,000. I kept track of everything in a spreadsheet, and by last year, he owed me over $15,000. Henry never seemed stressed about the debt. He would thank me casually and promise to pay me back soon, but there was never any urgency. Meanwhile, I was putting off buying a new laptop, skipping vacations, and eating mostly pasta and rice to keep my expenses low so I could help him whenever he called. Our parents knew about the situation but never intervened. Our mom would actually encourage me to help him out because family should stick together. She would say things like how lucky Henry was to have such a responsible brother. Our dad would just nod along and change the subject whenever the money topic came up. The situation got worse 6 months ago when Henry lost his job. The company was downsizing, and he was one of the first to go. Instead of immediately looking for work or cutting his expenses, he took it as an opportunity to relax and figure out what he really wanted to do with his life. He started talking about maybe going back to school or starting his own business. During this time, he was still living in his expensive apartment and maintaining his lifestyle. He would call me every few weeks asking for money to cover rent, utilities, groceries, or other expenses. Each time, he would assure me that he was actively job hunting and would pay me back as soon as he found something. I started getting frustrated but didn't know how to say no. Henry has always been good at making you feel guilty for not helping him. He would mention how stressed he was about money and how he couldn't sleep at night worrying about his future. He would also bring up all the times he had been there for me emotionally, which wasn't really true, but it still made me feel bad. Our parents were also pressuring me to help him during this time. They would call me and talk about how worried they were about Henry and how they wished they could help him more, but they were on a fixed income since Dad's retirement. They never directly asked me for money, but the message was clear. The breaking point came last weekend at our cousin Emma's, 26F, graduation party. The whole extended family was there, including aunts, uncles, cousins, and family friends. It was held at our uncle's house, and there were probably about 40 people there. Henry had been drinking for most of the afternoon. He gets louder and more obnoxious when he drinks, but everyone usually just laughs it off because that's Henry being Henry. I was standing with a group of cousins when Henry walked up to us with a beer in his hand. He started talking about how tough things had been lately with the job search and how grateful he was for family support. Then he put his arm around my shoulder and announced loudly enough for half the party to hear that I was his personal ATM and the best little brother a guy could ask for. Everyone laughed, and one of my cousins joked about wishing she had a brother like that. Henry then went on to say that I was so good with money that I could probably support both of us for years without even noticing. He said I was like his financial advisor, except I also paid all the bills. I could feel my face getting hot, but I tried to laugh along because I didn't want to cause a scene. Henry wasn't done though. He started telling everyone about specific times I had helped him out, including amounts and what the money was for. He made it sound like I was eager to give him money and that I enjoyed taking care of him. The worst part was when our dad joined the conversation and started praising me for being such a good brother. He said that Henry was lucky to have someone so responsible looking out for him. Our mom came over too and hugged both of us, saying how proud she was of how we supported each other. I excused myself and went to the bathroom, where I stood in front of the mirror trying to calm down. When I came back out, Henry was still telling stories about my financial support to a different group of people. This time he was talking about how I had covered his rent for 3 months and how I never even asked when he would pay me back because I trusted him completely. Later in the evening, as people were starting to leave, Henry pulled me aside and asked if I could Venmo him money for gas to get home. He said he had forgotten to stop at the ATM and was completely broke. I transferred him $50 without saying anything. On the drive home, I kept thinking about everything that had happened. I realized that I had become a joke to my family. They saw me as the responsible one who would always be there to clean up Henry's messes. Nobody seemed to think there was anything wrong with a 32-year-old man being financially dependent on his younger brother. When I got home, I opened my banking app and looked at all the transactions to Henry over the past 3 years. The total was over $22,000. I had never calculated the full amount before, and seeing it all together made me sick to my stomach. I spent the rest of the weekend thinking about what I wanted to do. Henry texted me on Sunday asking if I could help him with his credit card payment that was due on Monday. I didn't respond right away, which was unusual for me. He texted again a few hours later asking if everything was okay. On Monday morning, I called Henry and told him I wouldn't be giving him any more money. I explained that I needed to focus on my own financial goals and that he needed to find a way to support himself. He was quiet for a moment, then asked if this was about the party. I said it wasn't about any one thing but about the overall situation. Henry got defensive and said I was being unfair. He pointed out that he had never demanded money from me and that I had always offered to help. He said he was going through a rough patch and that I was abandoning him when he needed me most. He also mentioned that our parents would be disappointed in me for not supporting family. I told him the conversation was over and hung up. Within an hour, I had calls from both of our parents asking what was going on. Our mom was crying and said that Henry had called her saying I was cutting him off completely. She asked me to reconsider and think about how much Henry was struggling. Our dad was more direct. He said I was being selfish and that family comes first. He reminded me that Henry had always been there for me growing up, which wasn't true, but I didn't argue. He said that since I was doing well financially, I had a responsibility to help my brother get back on his feet. I told both of them that my decision was final and that they needed to respect it. I said that Henry was an adult and needed to figure out his own problems. Our mom asked what Henry was supposed to do about his bills, and I suggested he find a job or ask our parents for help. That evening, Henry showed up at my apartment. He was calmer than he had been on the phone and said he wanted to apologize for how he had talked about me at the party. He said he was drunk and didn't realize how it sounded. He asked if we could work out some kind of payment plan for the money he already owed me and if I would consider helping him one more time with his rent. I told him I wasn't interested in a payment plan and that I didn't expect him to pay back what he already owed me. I said I just wanted the financial request to stop completely. Henry said he understood but asked what he was supposed to do about his immediate expenses. I told him that wasn't my problem anymore and closed the door. He stayed outside for a few more minutes, but eventually left. I watched from my window as he sat in his car for about 10 minutes before driving away. It's been 4 days now, and I haven't heard from Henry directly, but I've gotten several calls and texts from family members. Our cousin Emma texted me saying she heard what happened and asking if I was okay. Our aunt called to say she thought I was being too harsh and that Henry really needed help right now. The worst was a text from our mom with a photo of Henry's eviction notice. She said he had shown it to her and that he would be homeless in 2 weeks if someone didn't help him. She asked me to please reconsider because she and Dad couldn't afford to help him themselves. I haven't responded to any of them. I've been going to work and coming home like normal, but I feel like I'm waiting for something to happen. I know Henry doesn't have any other options for money, and I know our parents will pressure me to change my mind. Part of me feels guilty for cutting him off so abruptly, especially knowing he might lose his apartment. But another part of me feels relieved that I don't have to worry about the next financial request. I've been supporting him for 3 years, and in that time, he's made no effort to become financially independent. I don't know if I did the right thing or if I should have handled it differently. Maybe I should have set boundaries instead of cutting him off completely. But I also feel like boundaries wouldn't have worked with Henry because he's never respected them before. I'm posting this because I need outside perspectives. Am I being too harsh, or was this the right thing to do? Update 1: It's been 3 weeks since my original post, and things have gotten much worse than I expected. Thank you to everyone who commented and messaged me with support. Reading your responses helped me realize I wasn't crazy for setting this boundary. Henry did lose his apartment. Our parents let him move back into his old bedroom, which they had converted into Dad's home office. They had to move all of Dad's work stuff into the basement and buy an air mattress because they got rid of Henry's old furniture years ago. I found out about the move from our cousin Emma, who heard it from our aunt. Nobody in my immediate family told me directly. Emma said Henry had been telling everyone that I abandoned him in his time of need and that he didn't understand how I could be so cold to my own brother. The first direct contact I had with anyone was when our mom called me 2 weeks ago. She said she needed to talk to me about the family situation. She explained that having Henry back home was putting a strain on her and Dad because they're both retired and on a limited budget. She said Henry was looking for work but needed time to get back on his feet. Then she asked if I would consider helping with Henry's expenses while he lived with them. She said it wouldn't be as much as when he had his own apartment, maybe just a few $100s a month for food and gas money. She emphasized that it would only be temporary until he found a job. I told her no and reminded her that I had been clear about not giving Henry money anymore. She got quiet for a moment, then said she was disappointed in me. She said that when she and Dad needed help when they got older, she hoped I wouldn't abandon them the same way I had abandoned Henry. That comment really bothered me because I've never abandoned anyone. I had been helping Henry financially for 3 years without ever asking for anything in return. But now that I set one boundary, I was somehow the bad guy. Our dad called me a few days later with a different approach. He said he understood my frustration with Henry but that I was punishing our parents by refusing to help. He explained that they couldn't afford to support Henry long term and that my refusal to help was forcing them to use their retirement savings. He said that if something happened to them because they couldn't afford their medications or medical care, it would be partially my fault. He asked me to think about whether my pride was worth risking my parents' health and financial security. I told him that Henry was the one putting their retirement at risk, not me. I said that they had chosen to enable his financial irresponsibility for years, and now they were dealing with the consequences. Our dad got angry and said I sounded like a completely different person, cold and selfish. The pressure campaign didn't stop there. Our aunt, the one who had texted me after the graduation party, called to tell me that she had never seen our parents so stressed. She said that Henry was a good person who had just hit a rough patch and that families should stick together during tough times. She also mentioned that Henry had been talking about maybe joining the military or moving to another state where the cost of living was lower. She said it would break our parents' hearts if he moved away, and that I could prevent it by just helping out a little bit. Our cousin Emma took a different approach. She invited me to coffee and said she wanted to hear my side of the story. I explained the whole situation, including how much money I had given Henry over the years and how he had never made any effort to pay me back or become financially independent. Emma was surprised by the amounts I mentioned. She said she had no idea it was that much money or that it had been going on for so long. She said Henry had been telling everyone that I had helped him a few times with small amounts and that he was mostly supporting himself. She also told me something I didn't know. Apparently, Henry had been borrowing money from other family members too. He owed our uncle about $3,000 and had borrowed money from two of our cousins. Emma said he always promised to pay everyone back but never did. This information made me realize that the situation was even worse than I thought. Henry hadn't just been taking advantage of me, he had been working his way through the entire family. It also explained why some of our relatives were so eager to pressure me into helping him again. They probably wanted him to get money from me so he could pay them back. The worst part came last weekend. I was at the grocery store when I ran into Henry. It was the first time I had seen him since he came to my apartment 3 weeks ago. He looked tired and had lost some weight, but he was dressed normally and seemed fine. He approached me and said he had been wanting to talk to me. He said living with our parents again was harder than he expected and that he really needed to get his own place soon. He asked if I would reconsider helping him with a security deposit for a new apartment. I reminded him that I had been clear about not giving him money anymore. He said he understood my frustration but that this would be different because he had learned his lesson. He promised that if I helped him this one time, he would never ask for money again. When I said no, he got frustrated. He said I was being stubborn and that I was hurting our entire family, not just him. He said our parents were stressed and fighting more because of the financial pressure, and that our cousins and aunts thought I was being unreasonable. He also said something that really surprised me. He told me that our mom had been talking about taking out a loan against their house to help him get back on his feet. He said that if I didn't help him, our parents might lose their home trying to support him. I told him that their financial decisions weren't my responsibility and walked away. He followed me for a few steps and said I had changed and that he didn't recognize me anymore. He said the brother he grew up with would never abandon family like this. After that encounter, I started wondering if I was handling this wrong. Maybe I should have gradually reduced my financial support instead of cutting him off completely. Maybe there was a middle ground that would have worked better. But then I remembered all the times Henry had promised to change and never did. I remembered how he had talked about me at the graduation party like I was his personal bank account. I remembered how he had never shown any gratitude or made any effort to pay me back over the years. I also thought about what Emma had told me about Henry borrowing money from other family members. It was clear that this was a pattern for him, not just a temporary situation. Even if I helped him get an apartment, he would probably be back asking for money within a few months. The family pressure has been constant. I get texts and calls from different relatives every few days. Some of them try to guilt me by talking about how stressed our parents are. Others try to reason with me by saying that Henry has learned his lesson and deserves another chance. The hardest part is that I'm starting to feel isolated from my family. I used to talk to our mom a few times a week, but now our conversations are always about Henry and money. Our dad barely speaks to me except to ask when I'm going to help my brother. Even Emma, who seemed to understand my perspective, texted me yesterday saying that maybe I should consider helping Henry just enough to get him back on his feet. She said she was worried about our parents and thought a small compromise might be worth it. I haven't responded to most of these messages. I've been focusing on work and trying to establish a normal routine. But it's hard to ignore the constant pressure and the feeling that my entire family thinks I'm wrong. I keep going back to the spreadsheet where I tracked all the money I gave Henry. $22,000 over 3 years. That's more than some people make in a year, and he never paid back a single dollar or even seemed grateful for it. I don't regret setting the boundary, but I'm starting to understand that the consequences are bigger than I expected. It's not just about me and Henry anymore. It's affecting my relationship with my parents and extended family too. I'm not sure what's going to happen next, but I know I can't give in to the pressure. If I help Henry now, I'll be right back where I started, and nothing will have changed except that I'll have even less money and my family will know they can manipulate me into giving up my boundaries. Update 2: It's been 2 months since my last update, and the situation has somehow gotten even more complicated. I was planning to just stay quiet and let things settle down, but something happened last week that changed everything. I found out that Henry hasn't been job hunting at all. Our cousin Emma told me because she felt guilty about pressuring me to help him. Apparently, Henry has been telling everyone different stories about his employment search, and Emma finally realized none of them added up. Emma works in HR at a marketing company, and Henry had asked her to put in a good word for him at her job. She said she would be happy to help and asked him to send her his resume so she could forward it to the hiring manager. Henry kept making excuses about why he couldn't send it right away. First, he said he was updating it. Then he said his computer was broken. Then he said he wanted to tailor it specifically for her company. After 3 weeks of excuses, Emma got suspicious and did some checking around. She called 2 companies that Henry had told our parents he was interviewing with. Neither company had any record of him applying or interviewing. She also checked with a job placement agency that Henry claimed was helping him find work. They had never heard of him. When Emma confronted Henry about this, he admitted that he hadn't been seriously looking for work. He said he was taking some time to figure out what he really wanted to do with his career and that he didn't want to just take any random job. He told Emma that he was considering going back to school or maybe starting his own business. Emma was shocked because Henry had been telling our parents and other family members that he was actively job hunting and just having bad luck. She said she felt terrible for pressuring me to help him when he wasn't even trying to help himself. This information explained a lot of things that hadn't made sense before. Henry had been living with our parents for almost 2 months, and in that time, he hadn't had a single job interview or even a phone screening. When I thought about it, that seemed impossible in today's job market, especially for someone with his experience in education. Emma decided to tell our aunt about what she had discovered, and our aunt told our uncle, and eventually, the whole family found out. Some of our relatives were angry that Henry had been lying to them. Others were angry at Emma for exposing him. The family group chat turned into a war zone for about a week. Our parents' reaction was the most surprising. Instead of being upset with Henry for lying, they were furious with Emma for investigating and sharing what she found. Our mom called Emma and accused her of trying to sabotage Henry's recovery. Our dad sent a long text to the family group chat defending Henry and saying that everyone needed to stop judging him. They also blamed me for the whole situation. Our mom called me and said that if I had just continued helping Henry, he wouldn't have felt so desperate and overwhelmed that he couldn't focus on job hunting. She said that my refusal to help had damaged his confidence and made him afraid to put himself out there professionally. Our dad was even more direct. He said that I had created this entire mess by cutting Henry off and that everything that happened afterward was my fault. He said that Henry was depressed and struggling, and that I should have known better than to abandon him when he was at his lowest point. I tried to explain that Henry had been lying to all of us and that he clearly wasn't taking responsibility for his situation. I pointed out that he had been living rent-free with our parents for 2 months and had used that time to relax instead of finding work. Our dad said I was being cold and judgmental. The conversation ended with our dad telling me that I had until the end of the month to reconsider my position. He said that if I didn't start helping Henry again, he and our mom would have no choice but to cut contact with me. He said they couldn't have a relationship with someone who would abandon their own brother. Our mom called me the next day to clarify what our dad had said. She explained that they weren't trying to manipulate me, but that they couldn't continue having a relationship with me if I was going to be selfish and uncaring toward family. She said that my behavior over the past few months had shown them a side of me they didn't recognize. She also said that Henry was family, and family comes first, no matter what. She asked me to imagine how I would feel if something terrible happened to Henry and I had refused to help him when he needed it most. She said I would regret my decision for the rest of my life. After that phone call, I realized that my parents saw this situation completely differently than I did. In their minds, Henry was the victim, and I was the villain. They genuinely believed that I had a responsibility to financially support my adult brother indefinitely, and that my refusal to do so made me a bad person. I also realized that they weren't going to change their minds. Even with proof that Henry had been lying about job hunting, they still blamed me for the situation. They were more upset with Emma for exposing the lies than they were with Henry for telling them. The ultimatum our dad gave me was supposed to end this week, but I didn't wait for the deadline. I called both of our parents 3 days ago and told them that I understood their position and that I respected their right to choose Henry over me. I said that I wouldn't be changing my mind about the financial support, and that I understood that meant they would be cutting contact with me. I told them that I loved them but that I couldn't continue relationships that were conditional on me giving money to Henry. Our mom started crying and said I was forcing them to choose between their sons. I explained that I wasn't forcing them to do anything, but that they had made their choice clear when they gave me the ultimatum. I said that if they changed their minds in the future, they could reach out to me, but that I wouldn't be contacting them anymore. Our dad got on the phone and said I was making a huge mistake that I would regret. He said that Henry was going through the hardest time of his life and that I was abandoning him when he needed family most. He said that when I was older and had more perspective, I would realize how wrong I had been. I told him that I hoped Henry would eventually figure out his life and that I wished them all the best. Then I hung up and blocked their numbers on my phone. The last few days have been strange. My phone is much quieter than it used to be. I don't get the daily texts from our mom or the weekly calls from our dad. I don't get updates about family events or photos of what they're doing. I also don't get requests for money or guilt trips about not helping Henry. I don't have to worry about screening calls to avoid another conversation about family responsibility. I don't have to dread family gatherings where I'll be pressured to change my mind. Emma texted me yesterday to ask how I was doing. She said she felt partially responsible for what happened with our parents because she was the one who exposed Henry's lies. I told her that she had done the right thing and that I was grateful she had told me the truth. She also said that Henry had been telling people that our parents chose him over me, and that he seemed proud of it rather than sorry about it. She said he had been posting on social media about how real family sticks together no matter what, which she thought was a dig at me. I looked at his social media for the first time in months and saw what she was talking about. He had posted several things about loyalty and family bonds, and one post specifically about how he was grateful to have parents who understood what family really meant. He never mentioned me directly, but the implication was clear. Looking at his posts, I could see that he was still living the same lifestyle he had before losing his job. He was going out to restaurants, buying new clothes, and generally not acting like someone who was struggling financially. It was clear that our parents were supporting him completely, and he was taking full advantage of it. I also noticed that he had changed his job status on social media to self-employed entrepreneur. When I looked closer, It seemed like he was trying to start some kind of online business selling motivational content about overcoming obstacles and staying positive during tough times. The irony of Henry giving advice about overcoming obstacles while living off our parents and refusing to get a job wasn't lost on me. But it also made me realize that he had probably never intended to get a traditional job. He had been using the time at our parents' house to pursue this business idea while letting everyone think he was desperately searching for employment. I don't know what's going to happen with my family long term. Maybe our parents will eventually realize that they're enabling Henry and that his problems aren't my fault. Maybe they'll get tired of supporting him financially and emotionally. Or maybe they'll continue to blame me for everything and we'll never have a relationship again. What I do know is that I feel better than I have in years. I'm not constantly stressed about money or guilty about not doing enough for Henry. I'm not walking on eggshells around my family or dreading phone calls that might be requests for financial help. I've started putting money back into my savings account for the first time in 3 years. I bought a new laptop last week without feeling guilty about spending the money. I'm even thinking about taking a vacation next year, something I hadn't been able to afford when I was supporting Henry. The hardest part is accepting that my family might be gone permanently. I had always thought that family relationships were supposed to be unconditional, but apparently, that was only true when it came to supporting Henry. When it came to supporting me or respecting my boundaries, conditions definitely applied. I'm not sure if I made the right choice, but I know it was the only choice I could live with. I couldn't continue sacrificing my financial future and mental health to enable someone who didn't appreciate it and wouldn't change. Final update: it's been 6 months since I cut contact with my parents, and I thought I would never hear from them again. I was wrong. A lot has happened, and none of it went the way my family expected. Henry's entrepreneur phase lasted about 4 months. From what I pieced together through Emma, he had been trying to build some kind of online coaching business where he would help people overcome personal obstacles and achieve their goals. He was making social media content and trying to sell courses and one-on-one coaching sessions. The business never took off. Emma said he might have made a few $100s total over those 4 months, nowhere near enough to support himself. She also said that our parents had been funding the business startup costs, including website design, marketing materials, and equipment for making videos. While Henry was playing entrepreneur, our parents were draining their retirement savings to support him. Our dad had to go back to work part-time at his old company because they couldn't afford their regular expenses plus Henry's lifestyle. Our mom started doing house cleaning jobs for neighbors to bring in extra money. According to Emma, the financial pressure was causing major problems between our parents. They were fighting constantly about money and disagreeing about how long they should continue supporting Henry. Our dad wanted to give him more time to make the business work, while our mom was getting frustrated with the lack of progress. The breaking point came when Henry asked our parents for a loan to attend some expensive business conference that he said would help him network and grow his coaching business. The conference cost $3,000, and our parents didn't have the money without borrowing against their house. Our mom finally put her foot down and said no. She told Henry that he needed to get a regular job while he worked on his business on the side. Henry got angry and said she was sabotaging his dreams. He accused our parents of not believing in him and said that if I were still in the picture, I would have supported his business venture. That comment apparently set our mom off. She told Henry that I had been supporting him for 3 years and that he had never appreciated it or paid back a single dollar. She said that he had driven away the one person in the family who had always been there for him, and that it was his own fault he was in this situation. Henry got defensive and said that I had abandoned the family and that real brothers don't give up on each other. Our mom told him that real brothers also don't take advantage of each other and that he needed to take responsibility for his actions. The argument escalated, and Henry ended up storming out of the house. He went to stay with a friend for a few days, during which time our parents had some serious conversations about their situation. When Henry came back, our parents gave him an ultimatum. He had 30 days to find a job and start contributing to the household expenses, or he would need to find somewhere else to live. They said they couldn't afford to support him anymore and that they needed to focus on their own financial security. Henry was shocked. He had gotten used to our parents always giving in to his demands and never following through on their threats. He tried to negotiate and make excuses, but our parents stood firm this time. Over the next few weeks, Henry did start applying for jobs, but he was extremely picky. He turned down several opportunities because they didn't pay enough or weren't the right fit for his career goals. Our parents were getting more frustrated as the deadline approached. 2 weeks ago, our parents reached their breaking point. Henry had been offered a job at a customer service call center that would cover his basic expenses, but he refused to take it because he said it was beneath him. He told our parents that he would rather move out than take a job that didn't utilize his skills and education. Our mom called him on his bluff and started packing his belongings. She told him that if he thought the job was beneath him, then he could figure out how to support himself without their help. Henry was stunned and tried to backtrack, but our mom had made up her mind. Henry ended up moving in with the same friend he had stayed with during their argument. From what Emma heard, the living situation is not going well. Henry is sleeping on a couch and doesn't have much privacy or independence. He's also completely broke because our parents stopped giving him money when he moved out. Last week, our mom called me. I saw her name on my phone and almost didn't answer because I figured it was some kind of emergency. When I picked up, she was crying and apologizing for how they had treated me. She said that the past 6 months had shown her how wrong she and our dad had been about the situation with Henry. She said they had finally realized that I had been trying to help Henry become independent, while they had been enabling his irresponsible behavior. She admitted that Henry had been taking advantage of all of us and that she should have supported my decision to stop giving him money. She said that cutting contact with me was the biggest mistake they had made and that they missed me terribly. Our mom asked if I would be willing to have dinner with her and our dad so they could apologize properly and try to rebuild our relationship. She promised that they wouldn't ask me for money or pressure me to help Henry. She said they just wanted their son back. I told her I needed time to think about it. Part of me wanted to see them and try to repair our relationship, but another part of me was still hurt by how they had treated me. They had chosen Henry over me when I set a reasonable boundary, and they had threatened to disown me for refusing to enable his financial irresponsibility. Our dad called me a few days later with his own apology. He said that he had been wrong to give me an ultimatum and that he regretted cutting contact with me. He said that watching Henry manipulate and take advantage of our mom over the past few months had opened his eyes to the pattern of behavior I had been dealing with for years. He also admitted that their finances were in bad shape because of supporting Henry, and that they were facing some tough decisions about their retirement. He said that if they had listened to me 6 months ago, they would be in a much better position now. Both of our parents asked if I would consider having a relationship with them again, but they were clear that they didn't expect me to resume any kind of financial support for Henry. They said they understood now that helping him had been hurting him, and that they should have set boundaries years ago. I decided to meet with them for coffee last weekend. It was awkward at first, but they both seemed genuinely sorry for how things had ended between us. Our mom looked tired and older than I remembered. Our dad seemed more serious and less jovial than usual. They updated me on their current situation. Henry is still living with his friend but struggling to find work that meets his standards. He's been asking our parents for money, but they've been saying no. He's also been trying to get back into their house, but they've told him that's not an option unless he gets a job and starts contributing financially. Our parents said that Henry has been trying to turn other family members against them, claiming that they kicked him out for no reason and that they're being unreasonable. Some relatives have been pressuring our parents to take him back, but they're standing firm this time. The conversation was emotional, and I could see that our parents were genuinely remorseful about how they had handled everything. They acknowledged that they had enabled Henry's behavior for years and that they had been unfair to me. They said that losing me had been worse than any financial stress Henry had caused. I told them that I appreciated their apology, but that I needed to be honest about how their ultimatum had affected me. I explained that being told to choose between giving Henry money or losing my family had made me realize that our relationships were conditional in ways I hadn't understood before. Our mom started crying again and said that she had never meant for me to feel that way. She said that they had been so focused on helping Henry that they hadn't considered how their demands were affecting me. Our dad said that they had taken my support for granted and assumed I would always be there no matter how they treated me. I asked them what they expected from me now. They said they didn't expect anything except the chance to rebuild our relationship. They promised that they would never ask me to give Henry money again and that they wouldn't pressure me to have a relationship with him if I didn't want to. When I asked about Henry's reaction to them reaching out to me, our parents admitted that they hadn't told him about it. They said that Henry was still angry with all of us and that he blamed me for turning our parents against him. They didn't think he would be supportive of them trying to reconcile with me. I told our parents that I was willing to try rebuilding our relationship, but that it would take time and that there would need to be clear boundaries. I said that I wouldn't discuss Henry or his situation with them, and that if they started pressuring me to help him in any way, I would end contact again. They agreed to my conditions and said they understood that trust would need to be rebuilt slowly. Our mom asked if I would be willing to have dinner with them sometime, and I said maybe in a few weeks after we had a chance to see how things went. Since that conversation, our parents have been texting me occasionally with normal updates about their lives. They haven't mentioned Henry except to say that he's still staying with his friend. They've been respectful of my boundaries and haven't asked me for anything. Yesterday, Emma told me that Henry had reached out to her asking if she knew whether I was talking to our parents again. She said he seemed concerned that they were rebuilding a relationship with me without including him. She didn't give him any information, but she wanted me to know that he was asking around. Emma also said that Henry's friend is getting tired of him staying there and that Henry might need to find a new living situation soon. Apparently, Henry hasn't been contributing to household expenses and has been treating the place like a hotel. His friend has been dropping hints about him needing to move out, but Henry has been ignoring them. I'm not sure what Henry will do when he runs out of places to stay. Part of me wonders if he'll eventually swallow his pride and take whatever job he can find. Another part of me thinks he'll keep holding out for something better and expecting other people to support him while he waits. What I do know is that I won't be part of his support system anymore. Even if our parents and I rebuild our relationship, I won't go back to being Henry's financial safety net. The past 6 months have shown me what my life can be like when I'm not constantly worried about his next crisis or request for money. I've been able to save more money in the past 6 months than I had in the previous 2 years. I bought a new car last month, something I had been putting off for years because I was always helping Henry with his expenses. I've also been able to relax and enjoy my free time without constantly feeling guilty about not doing more for my family. The relationship with our parents is still fragile and uncertain. There's a lot of hurt on both sides that will take time to work through. But I'm hopeful that we can build something healthier than what we had before, something that's based on mutual respect rather than financial obligation. As for Henry, I don't know if he'll ever learn to take responsibility for his own life. He's 32 years old and has spent most of his adult life being supported by other people. Breaking that pattern will require him to fundamentally change how he sees himself and his relationships with others. I used to think that cutting him off was the worst thing I could do to him, but now I realize it might have been the best thing. For the first time in years, he's facing real consequences for his choices. Whether he learns from those consequences or continues to blame everyone else is up to him. I'm not holding my breath for Henry to change or apologize. I've accepted that he might always see me as the villain in this story. But I'm okay with that because I know I did the right thing, even when it was difficult and even when my whole family turned against me for doing it. The important thing is that I'm finally living my own life instead of constantly managing someone else's problems. I have my peace back, my financial security back, and hopefully soon, I'll have some kind of relationship with my parents back too. That's enough for me.